Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Crime Family. This week, we're going to be talking about the case of the missing O'Brien brothers, three brothers who were abducted by their father almost 25 years ago. The case still remains open and unsolved, and there's lots of theories going around about what could have possibly happened. So we're going to get into all of that. So thank you for joining us. Let's get started. All right. So, like I said in the intro, this is the case of the missing O'Brien brothers. Three brothers. They were aged 14, 11, and 4. Adam, Trevor, and Mitchell were their names. And this took place in Newfoundland. Do either of you know anything about this case at all?
No, I've actually never heard of it.
Yeah, me either. I've never heard of it.
All right, so this case does take place in the small town of Torbay, Newfoundland. And I guess at the time it was pretty well known because there was a lot of, alerts going out across the country in search of the three boys. But I think obviously since it's been almost 25 years, it's obviously calmed down a bit. So there's not a lot of information out there about this case, but I wanted to do it because I found it very intriguing. I went down the rabbit hole of all these different forums and theories, so I'm interested to know what you guys think, and because it's still unsolved, it's very interesting. So this all took place on November 9th of 1996. So not much is known about the family dynamics prior to the leading up to November 9th. So we don't really know a ton about the boys' lives prior to that, or Gary or Diana's lives, which are the parents. So we don't know a ton, but Gary and Diana were divorced prior to this. So Diana had custody of the three boys, and Gary was given, he had visitation rights on the weekends. So usually Saturday or Sunday, he would come by, pick the kids up at Diana's apartment, and he would take them out for the day and then return them by the end of the day. So that was kind of their routine. According to Diana, in interviews since this all happened, she said that Gary had some anger issues, he had some violent tendencies, and he also had some suicidal thoughts. In the years leading up to this, which was probably had a hand in their divorce. But again, I don't really know much about their marriage, so I can't say for sure. But on November 9th, it all started when Gary called Diana and said that he was going to be a little bit late to come pick up the boys, because he was scheduled to have them that day. The youngest boy, Mitchell, who was only 4, he wasn't really feeling well that day, so his mother didn't think that, she was thinking maybe he should just stay home. It might not be the best idea for him to be out for the day, but she relented and thought, whatever, this is a routine. She didn't want to do anything to upset Gary. So she was fine that he was going to be a little bit late. She didn't really ask any questions. So he did eventually come and pick them up at her house in his car. And then he picked them up and drove off. And little did Diana know this was going to be the last time she ever saw the boys. But she did hear from Gary. So around 8:30 p.m., which was around the time he was scheduled to drop the boys off back at their mother's house, Diana got a call from Gary. And he basically said that he wasn't going to be returning with the boys and that she would never see them again. And of course, he also gave some additional information. He said that he had rigged the family home with explosives and the whole entire house would blow up if anyone were to so much as ring the doorbell to the house. So Diana was actually with her sister at this time, and of course Diana just she demanded to speak to the children. She wanted him to put them on the phone right away, and all Gary said was later. He just said that one word answer and then hung up the phone. She couldn't reconnect with him again. She couldn't get in touch with him again after that. So Diana was, of course, a total wreck. She was on the floor sobbing. So it was actually her sister who had to call the police. And she called the police and told them the situation. And the police did go to Gary's home, which was in Torbay, Newfoundland. And at first, they didn't really know if it was the truth, what Gary had said about rigging the home and everything like that, because they thought maybe he's just saying this as a distraction, as a way to like keep them away from the house. But the police do go and they do see that the house is in fact rigged with 2 400-pound propane tanks that are hooked up to the gas line that were rigged to like explode if the doorbell was rung. So it was all true. So the police actually spent a little bit of time trying to disarm the bombs, which eventually they did. And once they got into the house, there was no sign of the boys, no sign of Gary, and there was no real evidence or anything to suggest to where they may have gone. The car was gone, not in the driveway. And Diana had said that Gary, he was an electrician. That was his job. So, he probably was very easy for him to, rig up these propane tanks and like connect them to like the electrical lines or something. He knew how to do that, so she wasn't too surprised at that. She also said that he was very introverted but also resourceful. So she knew that he was very smart and he was able to, be resourceful to get out of situations or to get things to go his way if he needed to. Once the police got into the home, they couldn't find anything with any leads as to where he might have gone. And this was around 8:30 is when she got the call, so it was a little bit of time after that. They went there, they tried to disarm the bomb, so this was much later into the night. They were already gone for probably 12 hours, so no one really knew where they could have been. So they did, of course, an initial investigation, initial search of the area, couldn't find anything to lead them to any sources or any tips or any leads. So
I just have a question, like, what did it ever come out, like, what was the point of the bombs in the house? Was it like to slow the police down? Was it to be like show he like meant business?
Yeah, see, I don't know. I was gonna actually ask you guys that kind of same question, because there was no real like definitive answer. I was thinking it was kind of weird, because if his goal was to like why would he call up and say that? Why wouldn't he just, because if he doesn't return the kids, he doesn't call, say anything, she would probably naturally just go over there if they don't return. And if he had rigged up the house, like, she could have rang the doorbell and it would have blown up and he would have killed her. So if that wasn't his goal, like, what's the point of calling and telling her all that information?
Yeah, maybe he didn't want to hurt her, but like wanted to stall the police, maybe not be able to have as much people following him as there could be. And this was his distraction. I don't know.
And Diana did say later that she did believe that that whole thing was a distraction. It was meant to slow down the police. And it was just kind of a way to give him some extra time. But like, he didn't have to call at all. He still would have had that extra time if he didn't call, because she probably would have waited a little bit. Just, she's not going to call the police right away if he doesn't show up at 8:30. So he still would have had that extra time. I don't know. It just seems kind of weird that he would call to say that, which is why she thought it wasn't true when he first told her. But obviously it was true. And like I said, she wasn't surprised when he was able to do this. And I think, or there's a theory out there, which I kind of agree with, that that's probably why he was late that day. He was probably doing the finishing touches on rigging up the house. And I actually don't think that the kids were ever at the house that day, because it doesn't make sense. Why would he rig the house and then bring them back there? Or why would he like bring them there and then start doing it while they're there? Like, the oldest one's 14 years old. He could ask questions. It's suspicious. Like, why would he just do that? It makes much more sense that he would do that and then go pick them up and then not even take them to the house. Then he would have had like 12 hours to go away with them wherever he wanted to go. So I don't think that he ever brought them to the house at all that day.
Could maybe like that was his original plan, was to rig up the house and bring them and then maybe kill them all in the house together. And then he just abandoned that plan for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. That's a possibility. I never really thought of that, but...
Yeah, because you did say he was suicidal, right? Like, he had suicidal thoughts, so maybe it was like a murder-suicide. Maybe that's what his plan was, but then he backed out of it for some reason.
Yeah, that's possible. I actually never really thought of that. But yeah, Diana said that he did have some suicidal thoughts, like, in the years prior. So she thought, like, if he's going to hurt himself, she didn't really think that he would hurt the kids, but she thought it was a possibility he could hurt himself. So... yeah, I mean, it did slow the police down, so if that was his intention, then it worked. Yeah, I don't really know like what the point of that was, unless he was, like you said, planning to do it. I don't think he brought the kids there that day at all. Like, I don't think he was doing all that work while the kids were there with him. Like, he probably did it before that, right? So how would he, if he had done that, how would he have gotten into the house with them? You know what I mean? Like if he had already rigged it up.
Yeah, maybe. Well, he like had it all rigged up, but I don't know. I guess that's a good point because like if he was planning on bringing them back, they'd still be able to open the door without anything happening, so they'd have to get in the house. So maybe he just changed his mind and didn't bring them back there and just totally rigged it up and then shut the door and left.
Well, because he said that it was rigged to explode if someone had so much as rang the doorbell. So I'm assuming if they had opened the door, it would have gone off too. But I guess if he must have known.
Yeah, but if he was planning on bringing them back, like he might not have set it up, wait till they were in the house and then set it up.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's true.
They got it all ready, and then once they were there, he would have like connected whatever he needed to connect for it to happen.
Yeah, that's true. That whole situation is kind of sketchy, but they did say that the explosion, like if it had gone off, like because it was 2 400-pound propane tanks, it would have been big enough to destroy the entire house and the surrounding houses as well. So it would have like completely destroyed like multiple homes. So it's a good thing it didn't go off. So the initial working theory was that he might have taken the kids and killed them all somehow, or because you see it in other cases where it's like they will do it as like a retaliation, or it's like if I can't have the kids, then like no one will have them kind of thing. So they're thinking that could have been it. So there were no leads at all for the first little while of the investigation. They just disappeared without a trace. No one had any idea where they could go. Now, for those of you who are outside of Canada, Newfoundland is an island. So the only way to get off of Newfoundland is by air or by sea. So they would have had to taken a ferry somewhere or taken a plane if they were leaving Newfoundland. Otherwise, they would still have to be on the island somewhere. And obviously, it's like big enough island, but it's not like huge. So Diana thought that they might still initially be in Newfoundland. He might have just taken them somewhere that was isolated off the grid or something like that. The case kind of went cold after that, initially. And then, about almost a year after the disappearances, some divers had found an engine at the bottom of the ocean that matched the description of the engine for a 1989 Ford Tempo, which was the car that Gary owned and the car that he was last known to be driving that day. So they bring up the engine, they run some tests, they run the serial number, and the serial number matches with Gary's vehicle. So they know it is from Gary's vehicle. So then the working theory was it was found Flat Rock, Newfoundland. So there was like a huge like rocky cliff, like just like near that area where they thought, okay, you might have driven the car off the cliff with all of them in it. And it's the Atlantic Ocean, so it's very rough, and they think that the currents could have taken, like if the car had broken apart when it hit the water, because it was a pretty high cliff, so like the impact would have maybe shattered the car or something like that. So they thought that it broke apart and all the pieces washed away, the bodies washed away, and like the engine was just heavy, so it just floated to the bottom, and that's why that was the only thing. But that was the only thing they ever recovered from that area was the engine. No other car parts at all, no bodies, nothing. So the working theory was that he had driven off the cliff. And that was about 10 kilometers from Torbay, where the family home was and where they were last seen. So Diana didn't really believe it. Like I said, she described Gary as being very resourceful. She thought this was another attempt at a distraction. Maybe he just took the engine out of the car, threw it off the cliff. So then if they found the engine in the search, they would just automatically assume that the car went into the ocean, and that would kind of end their search. So she never really believed that that was what happened. But that was kind of all the police had to go off of. Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
I mean, that is a good theory, like to distract them. But I don't know. Like I feel like because you said this case is still unsolved, so I feel like they must not be like. To me, it sounds like they might not be alive because they would have been like somebody would have to find them now, or like because if you fall in the ocean, like especially the Atlantic Ocean, like you could be anywhere and nobody could ever find you because like it's so rough and it goes for miles and miles. So like. I don't know, to me, I find like maybe they aren't alive. Maybe they're out there somewhere and their bodies haven't been discovered. I don't know. It's really hard to say though.
Right, so they found like the empty car in the water? Is that what we're talking about?
No, just the engine.
Just the engine of the car?
Yeah. Like a part of the engine or like it was a small, like it was just the engine. So she thought that he had taken the engine out of the car. He was an electrician, so maybe he knew how to like disconnect the engine. I don't know, it's not the same as like knowing a car or mechanics, but it might be similar. So she thought that he had just taken the car apart, taken the engine out, threw it off the edge of the cliff.
Just finding an engine in the water does not make me think that the car went in the water. at all. Is that...
Well, that was the working theory. That's all they had to go off of. They thought that because it was a year after the initial disappearance, so they thought in that time the rest of the car, like if it had, like I said, if they thought it had broken apart, because like it's a huge cliff, so the impact, like if you hit water from that high up, like completely destroy anything that hits it, like a car would probably break apart. I don't really know, like physics.
Okay, yeah, I see what
So
you're
they thought,
saying.
like,
The
maybe there
engine's
was,
so
like, a bunch-
heavy and dense, it just like sunk, and everything else broke apart and floated away.
Yeah, like the bodies floated away, all the other car parts floated away, because a year had gone by, so it wouldn't take long.
Okay, did they ever find any other parts though?
Never. They never found anything else, just the engine.
Sorry, I was listening, but I went off and like started Googling something just related to this case, and I got distracted. But anyway, okay, yeah, that's super strange. To me, it does feel like it was just maybe the engine got thrown in the water. I feel like they'd have to find something else somewhere.
Yeah, that was my initial thing. I'm like, there has to be a trace of something, like that many pieces. Like if there's that many pieces of a car, that's the only thing they find. Like maybe the bumper, anything. Like I don't know.
But it's an island, so like you said, there's only two ways to get off of it: the water or the sky. So somebody would have, like, if they got on the ferry, Newfoundland ferry, they would have had to like reserve their spot. They would have their name, so somebody would have known. If they got on an airplane, somebody would know.
But also a little bit of context for that. So they weren't expected back home to be dropped off until 8:30. So they had a good, I don't know what time they really got picked up. That's 10 hours. And Torbay, which is where Gary lived, I Googled it. It's about a 17-minute drive from St. John's, which is where the airport would be. So we could have driven them to the airport, gotten on a plane. This is before 9/11. Security is like nothing, right? This is before like they upped the security. So you could probably walk on with like, I don't really know, but like you wouldn't. And it was before there was like a missing persons report, because they were missing at that
ticket,
time.
though.
We could have gone to the airport and bought it.
Also, there's a ferry, right? Like, remember, we grew up right by the PEI ferry. We could get on the PEI ferry,
true, yeah,
and get off of it. No one checks your ID as long as you pay. They don't care, right? You can go on and off without anyone even knowing what you did.
Yeah, and I don't really know like what ferry goes to Newfoundland. Like I don't know. It's also November. It would have been off season. I don't know if the ferry would.
Right.
Go.
Yeah. Okay.
So
the
likely
ferry
it was
runs
an
all
airport.
year round.
Yeah, and like you said, it was before 9/11, so it might even before. They probably didn't check IDs on the ferry, if they even still do now. I don't even know.
Yeah, and at the airport, it was before all that security, right? So they could probably. I'm sure you would have had to show some ID. I don't really know, but it's like maybe 1996. So
yeah, like maybe not for your kids though. Especially when you were traveling in Canada, you didn't even have to have a passport. So it's.
I remember traveling to like New York when we were kids, and they never checked like our IDs or our birth certificates or our passports.
Yeah, they drove like, this is obviously not the same scenario because they're in Newfoundland, but we like drove through the border and they didn't even check our passports back then. So yeah.
Yeah. So, and especially like maybe if he showed ID at the airport and then they just, those are his 3 kids. Like they're not going to question. And it's not a missing persons case yet because they weren't reported missing. If it had been in that like 10-hour window from when he picked them up, like she would have, there's no like warrant out or no missing persons thing out for them. So it is possible that they could have flew. But I mean, like I said, the oldest kid was 14 at the time. So I don't know. I feel like if you're 14, like you're more chance you're going to ask questions. Like he's not just, I don't really know. Like you're not going to just get on a plane without asking any questions at all. Like where are we going? Why are we getting on a plane? I don't know. And if you're 14, you can put up more of a fight. It's not like, you're a toddler. You
probably would though. Your dad's telling you we're going on a trip. You're not going to fight him in the airport, right? You're going to be like, okay, let's go. Right? Like, it's not like he was estranged. Like they didn't know. Not like they didn't know him, right? He was their dad, so they're not going to put up a fight. I wouldn't think.
Yeah, that's true. So it basically could be very easy for them to just get on a plane and be out of Newfoundland before 8:30 even comes. But he did call at 8:30. So wherever he wasn't on a plane at 8:30. He was able to make a phone call from somewhere. I don't really have any information about I don't know if they traced the call, like where the call came from or anything like that. There was no information out there about that. I don't think they did. But like maybe if they traced the call, it would have, if he had called them from the house, if he had called them from like Nova Scotia or somewhere else in Canada, like they would know, right? But
then they didn't have like caller ID or like, I don't know, like they probably didn't have a GPS back then either, so they couldn't really track where, who knows? Right? Yeah,
they probably didn't have like all the cell towers they have now either, so they couldn't like ping off the tower like accurately.
And there's a lot of water between Newfoundland, like Newfoundland's like surrounded by water, so.
But they could probably tell if it was a landline versus like a cell phone, so that.
But there would have been cell phones back then either, though.
What year was this?
This was in 1996.
Yeah, so there wouldn't have been cell phones back then.
Like really early, like maybe car phones and stuff, but
You know what I mean? Like,
But all we know is that he was alive at 8:30 because he made the phone call at 8:30 or around that time to explain that he wasn't going to be dropping the kids
yeah,
off.
he was alive.
That doesn't mean the kids were alive.
But his kids could have been dead.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Because when she asked to speak to them, all he said was later.
Yeah,
One word answer, and then hung up.
They could have been dead already, and he's just calling like to have an alibi type thing. Like I called them, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like maybe if they were alive, then why wouldn't he just put them on the phone just to like prove that they were alive? I don't know. But like I said, we don't really know a ton of information at this point. So I don't know. But like I said, there's so many theories surrounding this case that like it's really interesting to talk it through because there's so many possible scenarios that could have happened. But then after they found the engine, they did a search again of like that whole area in the water, like the surrounding area. They found nothing else, no other sign of the car, no other sign of anything. And again, the case went cold. This was all that they had. This was in a year after. This was 97. And then again, it went cold for a while. That no one ever called Diana. Like she got no updates about anything. As far as we know, it was still an active investigation, but there's only so much they can do. If there's like very little leads to go on, like they can't really do that much. Diana's sister, actually, I read in some articles that Diana's sister believed that Gary killed himself and the kids, very likely that day. So she thinks that's kind of where it ends. But Diana has never once believed that. She thought that they were still alive and he had taken them somewhere, even though he did have suicidal thoughts in the past. But she never thought that he would hurt the kids. But even though he might have hurt himself, but not necessarily the kids.
Did they ever like talk to witnesses like in the neighborhood of where he lived to see if anybody saw anything? Like, did they talk to anybody?
I couldn't find any information on that. Nothing ever came out about whether they had talked. I'm assuming they probably did. Nothing came of it. They probably had like, some tips or some initial leads that never really resulted in anything. So they never really got released or published. But yes, I never heard it or never read anything about
it. Just
that.
I don't know, it just boggles my mind that 3 or 4 people have just disappeared. And nobody knows where they went.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's crazy that like this whole family was able to disappear without without any witnesses.
And also, if you think about it, even if he did throw the engine into the water as a distraction, then how did they get anywhere? There's no engine in the car. What are they going to do? Was someone else involved? Was in another vehicle?
Car? Yeah.
Or something?
That's a lot of effort. Like take the engine out of the car, like drive that engine, win another car, throw it over, and then get back in another car and go.
And they didn't even find it for a year after. So it's not like if he was hoping it would be an initial distraction, didn't work a year later.
Were they able to tell, like, was that his engine or was it some random engine? They
ran the serial number on the engine and it matched his car. So they know it was from that car, the 1989 Ford Tempo.
And they never looked into like anywhere for like car parts, like besides the ocean. They didn't look like maybe in like a garage or like any type of other place or.
No, well, I can't say they never looked, but like I said, nothing ever came out that probably didn't result in anything. Like I said, I feel like in the initial stages, they probably have like a bunch of different possible leads, and then they kind of like, most of them don't end up in anything. So I don't know. But the only thing that ever resulted in anything was finding this engine, and they ran the serial number. They knew it was his. So that's all they know. They know that
I feel
the
like
engine...
it is possible, but yeah, like that car got completely destroyed, and then like everything just floated away, and like because you know like Newfoundland's the Atlantic Ocean. It's huge, right? Like it could have floated away and like landed up on some random shore somewhere where nobody would have thought to like check. I mean, like car parts.
Or like they could have just been like the current could have just taken them under. They're like
and then they sunk really deep out there.
Yeah.
And like if they were buckled in their seatbelts, they would have like floated down with that stuff. It's not like their body would have like floated up or anything.
But I mean, if the car got destroyed on impact, then they probably did too. Because
Newfoundland is so isolated. Like there's so many so many isolated places that like if they didn't go in the ocean, then they would have had somebody else driving them to get to throw off the engine, to get to where they were going, to get on a plane, to get on a boat. So somebody else had to be involved. The car else
he could have had another car. Like he could have rented a car from somewhere. Like he could have had a secondary. I don't know. But that's why
because they're not gonna walk.
Well, that's why the working theory was that they just drove off the cliff. it was a very high cliff, and that they found the engine, and that was kind of like, yeah, so that was like the working theory. Once they found the engine, for sure, that was kind of what they were thinking before, like that he just killed himself and the kids. But once they found the engine, that kind of really became the leading theory. And I guess, I don't know if they ended the investigation at that point or what, but they had no confirmation either way. So again, a year goes by, nothing happens. But then a year later, in 1998, a tip comes in that changes the whole entire investigation. So they receive an anonymous tip from a woman in Thunder Bay, Ontario, who says that she recognized the boys from a missing persons poster she saw, and that she used to babysit the boys for Gary. And they knew that this tip was credible because she provided very intimate details about the family that wasn't released to the public, that no one would know unless they knew the family. She knew a nickname that one of the boys had. She knew it was his nickname. Again, that wasn't anything that was released to the public at that time. So they got this anonymous phone. It was like through an anonymous tip line, I guess. And the police spent many, many days, weeks, and resources trying to find this woman. They could never find the woman again. She never went into police headquarters. They never could find her. She basically just dropped off the face of the earth after this tip. So for those of you who don't really know the geography of Canada, Thunder Bay, Ontario is like roughly 4,000 kilometers from Newfoundland. It's in another province, and it's a significant amount of kilometers away. So that is now considered their last known location, is in Thunder Bay, Ontario. But then there's a whole question of, I don't really know how anonymous tip lines work, but like, why would this woman call up the anonymous tip line and then never be found? Like, that's it? Oh, I have all this information that could totally solve the case, and then they'll never speak to you again. Bye. So there's theories that like Gary, it was someone who knew Gary. Gary put this person up to it to like distract the police once again, to say that I was here. So then they would like focus their attention into Thunder Bay. So if this tip is credible, then they did get out of Newfoundland, and they were in Thunder Bay at some point, if you can believe this babysitter. Which again, how would she know all this personal information about the family and the nickname? You know, she has to have known something to know that information.
Yeah, maybe she like sent in the tip, and then maybe she just happened to die or something. So like she could never come forward again.
Because it seems very weird. It's like, why would you call and give this tip and then never speak to anyone again? And like, why wouldn't you just go into police headquarters? Maybe you wanted to remain anonymous. Someone thought maybe that then Gary had like done something to her once he found out that she put this tip through, or something like that, tracked her down. So I don't really know, but if she did babysit for the kids, there was missing persons posters up. And I was also reading in some of like the articles that I was reading for this case, some folks say that like Thunder Bay, this was in 98, so Thunder Bay, you know, it was kind of like it's a smaller community, and you know, even though it's considered a city, but they said that it was very much the place where you could like enroll your kids in school without having to show ID. So like they could have just enrolled them. It's far enough away from Newfoundland, especially a couple of years after the case gone cold. There's not as many, it's not, you know, in the news every day or anything like it would have been at first. So it is very possible that nobody recognized these kids, all except this person who said she saw it on a missing persons poster. So officially their last known location, according to the police, is Thunder Bay, Ontario. They believe the tip, but they were never able to track down that woman again. So that kind of makes everyone believe that the whole engine thing was a distraction, that like Diana was right when she said that he was just trying to throw off police. And she believes that they actually did in fact get out of Newfoundland. And then that was in the 90s. And that's the last known tip or lead that ever came from the case. So they have been receiving tips. The last known tip that they received was in 2016. So as recently as 2016, they were receiving some tips, but there's been no other like further developments and no further updates about the case. So they are considered missing at this time. Do you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, this is like way before social media and stuff, so maybe like it is possible they just kind of had a new identity, and then the kids, I feel like, were maybe young enough and they just adapted to this new life they had. And so how old did you say the kids were again when they went missing?
They were 14, 11, and 4.
Okay. Well,
and
so
it was almost...
for sure the 4-year-old maybe like won't even remember his life before this happened. This is just his new life. The other kids, I don't know.
Yeah, and like so, the 14-year-old, he would be 39 at this time. But it was almost 25 years ago. He would be 39. The 11-year-old would be 36, and then the 4-year-old would be 29. So
did you find any like age progression photos that they do sometimes?
Yeah, the age progression photos were released in 2017. So, and there is currently there was at one time a $50,000 reward that was being offered for any information that would lead to the finding of Gary or the boys. So we're gonna post those like age of progression photos on our Instagram, so that you can see them. Maybe you know something. You never know, right? Who knows something. So, and like I said, those were from 2017, but yeah, that's currently where the case sits. And like there's been interviews with Diana kind of on like the anniversary years of their disappearance, and she says that she wholeheartedly believes that they are alive, and she thinks that either Gary took them and joined some sort of religious cult off the grid where there's no access to technology. She said that's why the boys haven't attempted to reach her, because the question is like, the 14-year-old, why would he not at least attempt to reach out, try to call her, anything? She says there's an obvious reason, or there's an obvious conclusion that you can draw from why they wouldn't contact her, because they are dead. But she says she never wants to believe that, or she just believes that they're living off the grid somewhere in an isolated part of the country. There was even some tips from the US that did come in at some point. They never really led to anything. And Gary is currently on the Interpol list, so he is he's a wanted person internationally, so he is on the Interpol list. So yeah, that's kind of where it stands currently. So what are you guys' theories or thoughts, reactions?
Like, to me it does seem like plausible that they could have driven over the cliff, but then for the police to go through all this trouble of like setting out these missing person posters and these age progressions, they do have reason to believe that they could still be out there. So it makes me think like maybe they are. Like it's really crazy.
Well, the babysitter tip is what makes like, because otherwise I would believe like, yeah, they probably were driven off the cliff like the same day.
But the police could be like, well, they could have been like, well, that's not reliable enough for us to think anything. But they are obviously going with it, so there's reason to believe that they are out there. Yeah,
so according to the police, like they are putting it out there that their last known location is Thunder Bay, Ontario. So they do believe that this tip was credible. They don't really know the situation regarding it, like if this person was like put up to it by Gary as a distraction, or if it was a legitimate tip. But unless, Katie, what you said is true, like this person gave this tip and then happened to like die shortly after, it's like, why would you give this tip that could like solve the case and then never, now it's out there that this tip came in, why would you not like identify yourself, like go into police headquarters, do something? Like it seems weird, like, oh, I know these people, I babysat for them at some point in Thunder Bay. Like that's huge information that you feel like, why even say anything at all? Why even give this tip if you're not even going to go further with it afterwards?
Yeah, I just find it hard to believe that 4 people are just missing to this day. Like I feel like they're not alive anymore, because somebody must know somewhere where they are for 4 people just to randomly disappear. I know, I'm not going to go with like the falling off the cliff theory, because I don't really think that's what happened. But I do believe that he did kill them. And then he killed them before he even did anything, and then he's just out there somewhere trying not to get caught. Like, I don't know if the kids were with him or not. Like,
but how do you explain the babysitter in Thunder Bay? Obviously, they were in Thunder Bay at some point. This person is babysat for them. Or at least knew information that wasn't out there. Like, how would she know the nicknames of one of the boys if she knew nothing? If it was just some random person who was, like, pulling a prank or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't really explain that. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, look at these, like, age progression photos. They, like... I want to say, like, but they do look like generic people. Like, there's nothing that stands out physically that they could be like, oh, this person's like super identifiable. It's like they would blend into like any population, right? So it's like not like they would stand out at all. It's crazy. Like, they could still be out there. And I don't know, maybe like the father was like, yeah, like something happened to your mother, so like we're moving away, and they just believed it up until still, maybe, I don't know.
And Diana says that she also thinks it's possible that he could have brainwashed them totally, turned them against her. Like I said that she was dead, said that she didn't love you, said that she's this horrible person or whatever. And like, of course, the 4-year-old, like you said, he's going to believe it. It's his new life now. He doesn't, he's been away from her for 25 years, only was with her for 4. So obviously, but like the 14-year-old, 11-year-old, if he brainwashed them, turned them against her somehow, because she says like that's the one thing that still like hurts her, was that they never tried reaching out. She never received a phone call. She said for the first 5 years after the abduction, she kind of shut herself out from the world. She never really left her house much. She was waiting for a phone call. She would just kind of like basically be a hermit inside her house waiting for a phone call that never ended up coming. But then after the 5 years has passed, she's actually become quite active in like other missing persons cases. She like advocates for missing persons investigation. She met with, this is a while ago now, but she met with Stephen Harper when he was prime minister to start this new like campaign for missing people. So she's becoming active in that space now, but initially she was very, very like reluctant to do anything, leave her house or anything. And like I said, her sister believes that the boys and Gary have died, but Diana never really believed that at all. And I don't really know if this is relevant at all, but there was also, like I said, I went down the rabbit hole for this case. So there were so many different theories. There was information out that was released that a few of Gary's friends in Newfoundland, in the couple of years shortly after the abductions, they had died by suicide, a couple of them as well. So people think, did they know something about the investigation or the abduction and they just couldn't live with the guilt anymore of knowing about it, not saying anything? Were they involved somehow? That's also a question too. Or was it just a coincidence that a couple of his friends had killed themselves shortly after? Like, no one really knows, and we'll probably never know. But, and like I said, I don't know if that's relevant or not, but just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe they helped the father, like, with this story to the kids about their mother was gone or their mother didn't want them anymore, and like all these people backing him up, so they believe it was easier for them to believe. And I feel like even though the kid was only 14, like if his father's saying this kind of stuff to him, he probably would eventually just believe it, and that would be his new life. It's super interesting that these people were killing themselves, and maybe they did know something and didn't say anything, and it was too late, or they were involved and just couldn't deal with it anymore. It's really interesting. So
like I said, we will put the age progressed photos from 2017 on our Instagram, on our Twitter and Facebook and all that, so you can take a look at them. If you do know anyone, or if you do know anything about this case at all, please use a secure landline number and call 1-800-222-8477. That's Crime Stoppers Canada, with any tips that you might have. And if you're not in Canada, you can go to csiworld.org. That's the Crime Stoppers International website, and you can make a tip. You can put in a tip, you can make a report on the website there, if you know anything at all. Yeah, so that's where the case is now. Very interesting. And frustrating and unsolved, and we may never know, but you never know. Sometimes there's cases where, things do get solved 20, 30 years after it initially happened. So there's still hope out there, but he could be in Canada. He could be anywhere in the world right now. So it's very important that if you know anything, make a tip and don't fall off the grid afterwards, and don't, go MIA after, because that's not helpful to anyone. So do you guys have any final thoughts? Or
I really hope they find them alive someday.
Yeah, that'd be a happy ending, like a reunion. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't think it's likely though. Not since it's been so long. No, not likely, but be nice.
And yeah, like I said, the oldest one, who was 14 at the time of the disappearance, would be now 39 years old. That's Adam. Trevor was 11, so he would now be 36, and Mitchell was the youngest, and he would now be 29. So, and Gary would now be in his 60s, because he was 40 at the time of the abduction. So, yeah, if there is any updates, we'll of course let you know. But and we hope that there is some updates. But yeah, so thank you for joining us for this episode. As always, you can follow us on Instagram at Crime Family Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Crime Family Pod 1. We have a Facebook page, so find us at Crime Family Podcast. If you have any case suggestions at all for future episodes, just drop us an email at crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear your suggestions, any feedback that you have, anything like that. Yeah, thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back next week with a new episode. Take care.